Okay, I'll admit that last video, as in the first video that I posted, that was a bit of a mess. Just kind of a mishmash of everything that I've kind of thought about in one go. Just like all in one go. Just kind of like just word vomited out of like everything. So this time I'm gonna just try and focus on one thing. And then I'll just make this one video and then try and just make the next ones just, kind of specific. So today we're just going to focus on, well, the world itself. That's it. Just the world. And I feel like this is still going to be like pretty long anyway, but whatever. But um, so the world that I'm trying to create, I want it to be set inside of the Dungeons and Dragons universe, but I also wanted it to be a bit different from how you'd normally play some sort of, any D&D kind of campaign. Obviously, I feel like it's separated almost so that you have stuff that's just on like a world, a planet, or stuff like that, and then like stuff that's maybe in space or like in the sea or stuff like that. But I feel like you can be really creative with how you start a world. Like everything is almost at your fingertips. You can change pretty much any parameters that you want to change. And it makes things just a little bit more interesting, a little bit more different. So I just wanted to try and make something a bit unique in that aspect. All of my friends told me that it was it was a pretty tricky thing to do. Just first thing you want to do, just make a world. But I don't know. I'm giving it a go. So we'll see. So the world that I'm trying to create is different to like a normal D&D world in that I wanted it to be in like a different sort of solar system. So it's even like the basic aspect of like, a planet orbiting around a star. Like I wanted that to be a little bit different as well. So the world that I kind of want to create, it's in like a binary star system. So you've got two stars orbiting around one another. But like while they're orbiting around one another, you also have the planet that this world's going to be on. So that's going to be actually orbiting around those two stars in like a figure eight sort of pattern. It realistically, this is like one of those things that just isn't going to happen. Like obviously any small perturbations in that orbit and it's just going to fly up into space, but just for the sake of creativity and just kind of having it sort of like that, let's just pretend for a moment that this is something that would actually work. So yeah, so they're orbiting like that and it's orbiting in the figure of eight. So then I thought about, okay, well, what do I want these stars to be? So I come from a physics and astrophysics background, so obviously talking about astrological bodies and astronomical bodies, sorry, it's quite natural for me. So I was like, do I want it to be like a big star that's like very blue and like, kind of very big that then dies like kind of quickly, or do I want it to be like a I don't know, like a smaller star that's like quite new and has like long to live, or this is some aspect, or So in the end, I actually chose going with a white dwarf as one of the stars, which is it's like a remnant of like a star. So a star, any sort of aspect to star on astrophysics, and I'll go down, but very briefly, a star will have like its main like life cycle almost. Like most of its life is spent on this like one bit, and then at the end it like teeters off into loads of different other things. But a white dwarf is what happens when at the end of its life, like it kind of just gets really big, and then its core turns into like iron, and then like the star like collapses in on itself and then explodes into a supernova. And a white dwarf is what is like the remnant of that like supernova explosion. It's like the core of the star almost. So I wanted that to be one of the stars. And then the other one, I wanted to be like a red dwarf. No, not a red dwarf, sorry, a red giant. Almost. I always say dwarf, but anyway. So then, like on the planet, it would feel very, very different being next to one of the stars to the other one. So unlike Earth, say, this planet that I want the world to start on doesn't actually have seasons, because seasons are from the tilt of the planet with respect to its orbit around a star. That's how the seasons come, you know. Here it's different, and here it's different to here, and stuff just like that. But I wanted it to be like, not really have that much tilt, the planet. So it doesn't really have seasons per se, but it kind of does, in that I want one of the stars, its orbit around the white dwarf, to be fairly normal to what Earth's is to our star. So it gets warm, you know, like it as it passes this star, it's like almost like a permanent summer, because obviously because there's no tilt, there's no seasons. So I wanted it to pass an orbit in such a way that it's permanently summer for that. And then I want it to be like a year for it to go around that star back to, so I need pens again. If you saw my previous video, I use pens a lot, but anyway, so if these are the two stars, right? And I don't have enough hands. This pen is the planet. So the planet is going to orbit like this, like in between, in like a figure of 8 between like the two stars. So what I wanted it to be, so that when it goes from here around this one and then gets back to here, that's 1 year. So that's classified as like 1 year on the planet. And then when it goes around the other one, that's like another year. So so it's like a year of summer, and then when it gets, so that's next to the white dwarf, and because the white dwarf is obviously white, that means that it's going to be like really bright, like the sky's going to be bright, it's going to be like, you know, summery and stuff like that. But this is where it gets interesting. See, now because I have the star on this one as a red giant, I want the orbit to be wide enough around that giant so that it actually gets super cold on the planet and turns into almost like a year of winter. So not to sound like Game of Thrones, but winter is coming is a very apt expression for when it's when it's traveling into the new year. But anyway, so you go this way, you go round the red giant, and the sky will turn like a blood red color, and then it would get really, really, really cold. It almost feels like very dreary, very like dangerous kind of vibes for that entire year. And obviously the players for this campaign are going to start in like the summer side, so they have like a year of gameplay before it turns into the winter. And I will be using expressions like the winter is coming quite a lot, just because it's fun. But yeah, so that kind of gives a bit of a like variance to how, because I feel like seasons aren't like a natural thing. I don't think, just I feel like because we live on Earth, it seems very natural. But if you just change like 1 or 2 things, it just doesn't exist. And I wanted to have that be like an aspect of my world, like just something a bit different in that world, in that regard. So yeah, so I wanted there to be like that kind of thing, just yeah, so that's the binary star system. And also the point like between both of the stars, so like at the point where it turns into new year, like here, I wanted there to be like a ring of asteroids that are like almost like this, and then the planet, like when it orbits, like goes through that ring of asteroids and it like celebrates like the new year on that planet. There's like massive celebrations and stuff, and you can see the asteroids in the sky as the planet passes through them, and I'm like stretching science a little bit, but so you get what's called Lagrangian points in science, which is like semi-stable points, like orbits, and that's actually what the James Webb Space Telescope is orbiting. If you want to go look that up, but a semi-stable point is almost like it's like the difference between a pen lying flat like this, like any sort of movement that it has, like it's just gonna stay flat like this, and a semi-stable point, which is like when it's resting like this, I won't be able to balance this pen because it's not very flat on the bottom. But if this pen was to stand like this, that would be a semi-stable point, because any perturbation that you push this pen in is just going to fall back to this point, which is a stable point. Anyway, so I wanted it so that because these two stars, the middle point between them will be like be one of these special points. Asteroids could orbit that point like how James Webb orbits its Lagrangian point. So I was like, oh, that would be pretty cool. Have like a set of like asteroids that, you know, celebrates the new year. It's kind of like a big scale thing which can affect the small scale stuff. And like people will like make wishes and stuff for the new year, like they do on Earth and stuff like that. But yeah, so I wanted to do that as well for the world. Okay, and then that's all the like macro kind of stuff, like super like space kind of stuff. Let's just like bring it down back onto the planet. So the planet, all of the inhabitants on the planet will have an affinity for a certain element, and I kind of took the I'm gonna say like took, but I took the idea a bit from Avatar, The Last Airbender, in that, you know, people will naturally just get the ability to like, you know, use that specific element. But in this case, it's not that they use that specific element, it's more that their body is more attuned to that specific element. So the elements slightly different than in Avatar, The Last Airbender, but I'm going to go with fire, water, you know, kind of standard, and earth, air, and lightning. I think they're the 5 I'm going to do. And each person in the world will have a natural affinity for these elements. Now, there's also, I should point out, that there's also 2, I guess 3 other elements which are also in play, but they're not really well known about in the world. So those would be life, well, kind of like light, dark, and cosmic energy. And they'll be used by the big bad, or like cosmic will be used by the big bad, but I'll put that in another video. But light and dark energy, I'm going to use symbols for obviously yin and yang. It seems very apt in that they kind of balance each other, and they kind of, one almost reinforces the other. I really like that imagery. It makes a lot of sense to me, so I decided to use that for the other 2 elements. So I guess there's 7. Is that 7? Yeah. But yeah, so when the players actually get into this world, they will naturally have an affinity for a specific element, but they won't necessarily know what that affinity is. So they'll have to play, like they'll have to mess around, you know, kind of try and figure out what it is that they want, what it is that their affinity is. But yeah, so that's that. I said this was going to be slightly more organized, but I still have a few points that I wanted to say from before, but it's fine. So how I said that the world goes from like a white dwarf into a red giant. Those are 2 stars. I also wanted there to be some danger, like kind of, which is meaningful for the for nighttime and for, well, yeah, just like nighttime and I guess coldness, because obviously I'm going to use these pens again, but if this is permanently summer and this is permanently winter, well, this is naturally going to be really, really, really cold during this winter, but it's also going to be really, really dark. And that's because the red giants don't actually give that much light. Again, I'm twisting the truth a little bit, but compared to like white dwarfs and like kind of stars like that, red giants don't actually produce as much light as they do. So it will be very dark and it'll be very cold. And because they're far away, like if it's over here, this star will look really, really far away. Like it doesn't obviously in this model, but I'm just doing with my hands. But this planet would be very, very far away from this star, and this star would look like basically just like a big, like, star, for lack of a better term. But then so something that happens during the dark and the cold. So my natural kind of mind, well, my mind actually went to, okay, what about creatures? So I kind of wanted there to be like night creatures that only come out during when it's cold, like nighttime and like the winters and stuff like that. Because if the planet is like going around like this, the only time there is nighttime is actually on this side of the planet, like when the planet's on like this side of the star, sorry. Because in here it's actually getting light from 2 different stars, even though this is dull, like dim even, like it will still get light from this star, so it will look bright, or like fairly bright over here. So there's not really night times during this middle section, but over here and over here there will be night times, and this will permanently be night basically. So it will be very, very, very easy for there to be just like creatures that come out during the cold and then start hunting. And that's what I did. I created these night creatures so that they come out during the cold and then they just start ravaging and hunting for like humans and like just anything really, any sort form of sustenance. And they will hunt in like packs. There'll be like locust swarms of these creatures, and the colder it is, the more of them there will be. Like they'll like go through villages and towns and just absolutely decimate them if there's not like any form of protection. So it kind of again gives meaning to the whole winter is coming kind of thing, which but but yeah, so that kind of, and it'll set like NPCs on edge, and it will set like villages on edge and stuff. Okay, so the next section I probably want to talk about like villages and I guess kingdoms. So the kingdoms that that I've created, I've only created 2 because I feel like any more and it's an obscene amount of traveling. Like I feel like you have one kingdom that you start in, you spend most of your time there, and then you have to travel to another kingdom like mid-game-ish, and that's where you learn a bit more about everything, and you learn a bit more about the world, the people, the big bad, and stuff like that. And then you move towards going like to the big bad, that kind of end game-ish. So I felt like 2 kingdoms was enough, and for what I've created, the 2 kingdoms I had was Kingdom of Kemet and the Kingdom of Thalion, which I will admit, I wouldn't be able to sell this or anything because, well, at least without changing the name, because I took Thalion off of one of my animes that I watched. It's from Reincarnation as a Slime, and I thought that was a really nice name, so I just yoinked it just for the for the campaign that I want to do for my friends. But yeah, so Kemet is a very standard kind of a kingdom. It's not mega technologically advanced. It just kind of keeps its medievalish roots and just does what it can to protect itself during the winter. Just kind of like strong gates and lots of people, and, you know, big militia kind of a city or kingdom, I guess. But but yeah, that's Kemet. And Thalion, on the other hand, is going to be a super technologically advanced civilization. Like, but the main, like the crux of their technological prowess is going to be in the runes that I want to implement into the game. And I'm going to have it so that this kingdom was like, I mean, I'll probably do like a lore video or something where I talk about Thalion in a bit more detail, but just for the basics, I wanted it so that the kingdom was founded by like a group called, again, I want to change this, but the Order of Blood. And so this Order of Blood was trying to gain power, as all cults do, you know. They were just like gain power and then start converting the populace and stuff like that. But this particular Order of Blood, they almost worship these like orbs, which and these orbs, which I'll call like orbs of power, or I think I had like a Latin name which I decided to use. I think it's Aeonis Dunamis or something like that. They're just so I called it the Aeonius Dunamis Spherica, the orbs of eternal power, just in Latin, just to be a little bit more fancy, you know. But so they kind of worship these orbs, which they form in like living beings, and they're like punch holes into like a fourth spatial dimension. And they kind of, they're like pinned or like attached almost to like living beings. So it's like a hole almost, but that hole like move with living beings and stuff, and it imbues living creatures with like energy and like power, which I know it might be a bit stereotypical, but it's kind of what I thought was kind of cool. But yeah, they kind of worship these, and they try and form them in like living creatures to try and cultivate them so that they can then take them back almost, and then kind of make themselves stronger. But Thalion, back to what the original point was, Thalion was founded by a group that separated from this order because they didn't believe what they were doing was correct. And so they almost had a civil war between these, between like that separated group and the Order of Blood. And they needed some form of power for themselves, because obviously the Order of Blood were going to get much stronger over time, so they had to come up with some sort of way to make themselves stronger. So they kind of, the separated group would search through the kingdom, search through ruins and all sorts, to try and find any form of power that they could that's separate from using these orbs, and they rediscover these runes, which were used in like ancient times, but were just lost to time. And so they rediscover them, and then they try and understand them a bit more, and they manage to fend off the Order of Blood by using these runes. And so this whole city was built by this separated group on the basis of runes. So everything in this city will be used with these runes. You'll have like lifts and like kind of computer-esque kind of things, which like transfer energy really quickly in order to perform sorts of calculations and things. It'd be used for like heating water, or like, you know, used in housing, building, everything. It would be throughout this entire city. And so I feel like it'd be kind of cool to just explore that and be like what the players kind of want. And I'll do like a full video on Thalion, but that kind of, I wanted that to be those kinds of kingdoms. But yeah, so that's like that. Trying to think about what else. I remember there was something I wanted to talk about the, oh yes. So, right, so another thing about this world is when I was creating this world, I wanted there to be a lot of almost science to it, because I'm a physicist. Like, it almost makes things feel more realistic when you have the basics, like, you know, the like space stuff and all of that. It almost gives you something more meaningful to like attach to and like relate to and stuff like that, and you can kind of create things that follow on from those. So for the world itself, I wanted it to have a high oxygen content. And I mean, again, it's like such a small thing, but it makes massive implications for the entire world and everything. Just higher oxygen content means that you'd have bigger monsters, which makes sense for some sort of D&D world. And that's proven, I guess, not proven, but I kind of took that from just like Jurassic era, like, you know, dinosaurs and such. The insects that were massive because they were able to take in more oxygen into their body because there was more oxygen in the environment. So they'd grow larger and larger and larger until they actually, I think there was some sort of statistic which said that some insects, the reason that they don't grow any bigger is because they can't support their own weight. I don't know whether that's true, but I think I heard something similar like that. But anyway, so the oxygen content, if it's higher on this planet, I wanted it higher so that the sky would actually look different. So a higher oxygen content means that the wavelengths of light, which again, this is just physics nerdy stuff, but the light that is reflected from the sun on Earth, from the sun, it reflects off like atoms in our atmosphere, and those the wavelengths that are reflected off of those atoms are blue because of the density of those atoms. So if you have a higher density, then what happens is you get more of those redirections, or like scattering it's called, but you get more of them, so the sky would look deeper blue, almost like a purpley kind of color, if you had like a higher oxygen content. And I mean, granted, I'm kind of like cheating a little bit in the fact that like people, they'd be able to move very like well, but at the same time they would also increase their carbon dioxide equally. So in the real world, they would probably like collapse if they were going from our kind of a world into one that with a higher oxygen content. But also another implication of just increasing the oxygen means that fire can combust really easily, and like fire can ignite, sorry, really, really easily. So fire in this world would be a like a ban. It would be banned almost. So any form of like fire manipulation or like just standard fire creation, be it with flint and steel or with like magic or anything, it would be outlawed. And then it's kind of annoying actually, because I did another sort of role playing, sort of like D&D, but it was called oh my gosh, I can't remember, but there was another role playing. If I remember, I'll say in maybe another video or anything. But this world, it had like trees which had like kind of sprouted through like the entire world, and that's why fire was banned on that planet too. And when I saw it, and because I played it with one of my friends, and I'm gonna play this world with, I just saw it and went, no, they're gonna think that I took it from this. But I actually did think of this high oxygen content being like outlawing fire before I did that. But anyway, that was just a bit of a tangent. But yeah, so higher oxygen content would just mean that fire is completely banned, and that would mean that fire mages and people that have affinities for fire would be hunted in Kemet. So in Kemet it's outlawed, but I guess I think in Thalion it would be a bit more like, you know, not persecuted, almost like you would be in Kemet. But Kemet, like that kingdom of Kemet, they need to put restrictions in place, otherwise the entire kingdom would just burn, because they don't have the means to control that kind of a fire. So they would just like Kemet have like put massive excuse me, they put massive like restrictions in place for like fire users, so that they just can't be they can't really go anywhere or do anything. They're persecuted by the kingdom. This also means though that water mages and people who have water affinity are highly sought out, and in Kemet they are almost idolized by the public and by everyone, just because they have the means of preventing fire, which is going to be a dangerous threat in this society. So the water mages are going to be like, you know, really like high up in the society of Kemet. But yeah, so yeah, that's I think a lot of information. I think this video is already going on pretty long, so I'll leave it at that for the world aspects. If there, I might make a second part if I feel like there's more things, like there's forests, magical forests and stuff. But I might save that for another one. But thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.